When you burn a library, it takes a single act. It takes a petrol bomb, a Molotov cocktail, and throwing it. But how long did it take to build it? Right, somebody had to find the site, they had to excavate the site, architects were involved, they created it, they then put books in it, and it became an institution of learning. And you can destroy it like this. And I almost feel like that's where South Africa is. I think we're at the, we're on the fork, and we need to make a clear, deliberate decision about whether or not we're going to create a better future for all of us. And that doesn't mean not making difficult decisions, but it does mean all of us involved. Or if we're going to continue with the them and us conversation. Many years ago, I used to work for a company called Metro Cash and Carry, which was interesting because I started out in finance and then found myself in a cash and carry environment. And by the way, the two worlds are exactly that, worlds apart. On the one, you're wearing a fancy suit, you're coming into the office every day, it's very sophisticated, you get tea in those boardrooms, and you talk in big fancy finance speak, and you structure macros and all the rest of it using Excel spreadsheets. And in the other, you live in the real world. The world of retail is the real world, the shops that you run. Real people come to those, and they buy real food, right? So by chance, I found myself at Metro, and I'll share with you how that happened in a minute, because even that was exactly that, by chance. So I found myself at Metro, and the CEO of Metro at the time understood that he had a problem. But he also understood that no one in his business knew how to fix the problem. And not dissimilar to many businesses today, he had very well-trained middle and senior managers whose singular fault was they'd been there for too long. And what happens when we stay in organizations too long is we tend to lose our sense of perspective. The world becomes my job, right? And businesses are built along line functions. So if I'm in procurement, I see the world as procurement, a little bit more maybe finance, but I never think about the world from an HR perspective or a marketing perspective or a sales perspective or a technology or an operations perspective. My whole worldview is based on my job. So anyway, so here's Carlos, and he realizes that he's got this problem, and he hires me, and he says to me, you've got 3 months to basically prove to me that the reason for which I hired you was the correct reason. And after 3 months, I went into his office, and I said to him, I've not been able to come up with anything. And he said, take 3 more months. So 3 more months to find something for you to do, somewhere where you can add value for us. So in the 90s, cash and carries were big business, huge business. And what happened was, when Mandela came to power, the ANC liberalized the market. The ANC said this idea that certain economies should belong to certain businesses is nonsense. And they opened up the markets. Overnight, retailers, ShopRite, Checkers, etc., moved into the townships. And Metro, like many cash and carries, was caught flat-footed. They didn't see it coming. Because if I'm supplying to a spaza shop and a retailer moves into that area, the retailer can price better, market better than I can. And so it created a cannibalization of the township spaza shops, which meant that the people for whom the cash and carries existed were losing business, so the cash and carries lost business. And this is an important point to make, all financial information, as I've come to learn, is a laggard. All financial information, income statement, balance sheet, statement of cash flows, changes in equity, all of those tell you what's happened. They don't tell you what's coming. And so, as was the case with cash and carries, they were just caught flat-footed. So I said to him, so look, you've got all these shops. You're looking at them as shops. Why don't we look at them as distribution centers? So where government has hospitals, prisons, schools, whereas our traditional competitors must buy from a central place and transport it, we have a shop around the corner. We could literally disintermediate the market. He said, sure, sounds great, go do it. And I did it with great success. First year, we did 16 million, which was tiny because Metro was a 17 billion rand a year business. And by the fourth year, we'd grown to a R500 million business, 467 million odd, and I'd built a substantial team around me. And as a percentage of revenue, we were generating the highest EBITDA in the business. But I realized then that the problem was business leaders take a functional view of a business. They see the context as not changing. And when I left Metro, I understood that it wasn't just Carlos who had that problem, that actually 99% of his peers were people who grew up in certain industries, did exactly the same jobs, and did not see the waves of change coming. I just want to make this point because it's important. The things that change our operating worlds are not things we can put on a strategic document. Whether you use Porter's 5 forces or the SWOT analysis or any of these documents, the things that change our operating environment, you can't write it down because you don't know it exists. So if you went to the CEO of a building society, right, which later, by the way, were bought by the banks, and said to them, the ANC coming to market is going to change your business, they would have said, how? They wouldn't have seen it coming. If you went to the taxi operators and said a technology platform built somewhere in the US is going to fundamentally change your operating environment, they would have said, how? Because they didn't see it coming. So the things that change the world in which we work and where we earn our money and create value are not things we can put on a document, which is precisely why leaders need to think in a different way. Leaders need to imagine a new future and have the courage to pursue that future, not see it as they've always seen the past. In our firm, we talk a lot to our own clients. We talk a lot about what we call the 4 laws of leadership. And the idea behind the 4 laws is that you as a leader need to exist above your management job. And in business specifically, management is being as efficient as possible with the resources that the shareholder has given you today to return good value to the shareholders. Leadership is about creating a different future for the business. And those two things are very different from each other, which is often why people who make great managers are quite poor at leading. So the first law we talk to our own clients about is that a leader has the role of finding the truth, not your version of the truth. We tend to be good in business at looking at our version of the truth. Let me tell you what this means. So if I'm in marketing, I look at market share, I look at net promoter score, I look at LSMs, and I look at all of this data and I go, we've built a great brand. If I'm in finance, I look at free cash flows, I look at working capital, asset turnover ratios, and I'll go, we've built an efficient business. If I'm in technology, I go, we built an amazing technology platform, we deliver value to the business, better than our competitors, we're phenomenal. And so everybody's patting themselves in the back. The role of a leader is not to look at these things from his perspective, it's to take a different perspective. So I spent some time with the guys at Alibaba, and it's fascinating. Every single management meeting at Alibaba will have an empty chair, because they have a philosophy that empty chair is occupied by the customer. And so after everybody's spoken, from marketing and sales and operations, they have to ask themselves the question, if the customer were here, what would his input be? And it's enabling them to look for a different version of the truth than the version of the truth that they've been prone to see, the version of the truth that they want to see. Raymond Ackerman, for instance, speaks very fluently about how when he was running Pick and Pay, he would spend a day a week in stores. I mean, this is Pick and Pay, and Raymond Ackerman's peak was 44 billion rand listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. As somebody who served as a director of listed companies, let me tell you, it's a tough job. You're getting SENS announcements, you've got to be very careful about how you're managing corporate governance, and there are a whole myriad of issues from a listings perspective alone, let alone how you run the business. You still have to run the business. And yet here's this man who was the CEO of it all, who still took 20% of his time every week, a day a week. And he was in stores, walking up and down the aisles, talking to customers, finding the truth. At Italtal, they talk about Booth's Law. Nick Booth is the CEO of Italtal, phenomenal guy. But when he took over the manufacturing facility for Italtal, which is ceramics, they were not producing the quality of tile they needed to make and the quantity they needed to make at the cost to be effective. And so he had to fix this problem. And he tells the story, he was working from 6 in the morning until 11 at night, and driving from their warehouse in the Vaal to Benoni where he lives. He's a Benoni guy like me, so see. Benoni guys always punch above their weight. I don't know why Benoni guys get a bad rap. There's Nick, there's Stephen Kossoff who runs Investec, there's me, there's Charlize Theron. Benoni's great. Anyway, so he was running this business, and he realized that there was a problem, and he was working the kind of hours that it was difficult for him. So he asked permission for his wife, and behind his office was an open room. He put a mattress there, and he slept at work. And the idea behind Booth's law is that in today's complex and changing environment, business leaders need managers who are willing to sleep at the job to get the job done, who are willing to take that kind of ownership to find the truth. And that's all Nick was doing. He was just spending time immersing himself in the problem big enough, often enough, to find the truth. So that's the first law. The second law is perhaps the one we most battle with in South Africa, which is our love for size. South Africans love big business. When you go to university, they tell you get a good job, go work in a big business. And what we've come to learn is, as the world is changing, actually, that it's being the best at what you do that's important, not the biggest. So the aim of great businesses is to be the best, not the biggest. Now, it might sound like marketing speak, but it actually isn't. Being the best might make you the biggest. Being the biggest doesn't mean you're the best. There is, although subtle, a critical difference between the two. If you look at the banking sector today, FNB runs an annual innovation prize for R1 million. It was started by Michael Jordan while he was there. And here's what he does. He disperses and democratizes power. So he says, we could let the management team go on a management conference and come up with a couple of innovation ideas, and then we do them. But why don't we let everybody, everywhere in the business, I'm talking everybody from the teller to the CEO, come up with an idea. We put the ideas in a central repository, and we create an egalitarian system where people can monitor the ideas and evaluate them, and the best idea gets $1 million. And eBucks comes out of that. The idea that they then made them the largest distributor of iPads comes out of that. The new app comes out of that. So a lot of what's driven the value of FNB has come through the dispersion of power into the rest of the business, because they've been looking for an opportunity to be the best at what they do, not the biggest bank that there is in the country. So that's the second. The third is to understand as a leader that vision excites people, not numbers. We love numbers as leaders. You go to work and you tell people, our goal this year is to grow EBITDA by X number. It's to grow market share by X number. And in truth, when you do that, all people hear is blah, blah, fish paste, more money for the shareholder. In today's world, vision excites people. In the most iconic speech of the 20th century, Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. He didn't say he had a spreadsheet with a standard set of operating processes and an income statement. All he had was a dream. And you'd be surprised today how many people who work in companies and they don't know what the dream of that company is. They don't know what its core purpose is. They don't know what its vision is. And it's about elevating the purpose for which we all come to work. And then the fourth and final law is to lead by the business case. And I think this is arguably the most important, because we're all biased, right? So when we meet, we see what we are, not the business case. When you present an idea, it depends. Do I like the way you look? Do I like the way you speak? What's your role in the business? What level in the business are you? How long have you been here? Do you belong to my club or don't you? And so we bring all these biases into making decisions, whereas actually the decision should be, does the business case hold? If we do this, will it create value for the business or won't it?